On my birthday, my son handed me a battered wallet, laughing with his friends. "It's as empty as your bank account." My cheeks burned, but when he unzipped the hidden compartment, his smirk crumbled and tears filled his eyes. What he saw changed everything. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. My name is Sophia, and I'm 64 years old. I raised my son Jason alone after my husband passed, when Jason was just a boy. I worked overtime shifts, cleaned houses, and skipped meals just so he never had to feel poor. On my birthday, Jason handed me a small box. Inside was a battered old wallet, empty. He smirked in front of his friends. "Here, Mom, it's about as full as your bank account." The room erupted in laughter. It was the sort of laugh that starts sharp and then spreads like a stain. Tyler threw his head back and slapped the table. Mia covered her mouth, giggling into her palm, as if that made it kinder. Brandon let out a low whistle, eyes sweeping the peeling linoleum of my kitchen, like the punch line had been installed under their feet years ago, and they were just now noticing. The Bluetooth speaker Jason brought thumped a bass line that shook the spoon in the sugar bowl. The scent of store-bought frosting and lemon cleaner clung to the air, sweet, chemical, and hard to breathe. I held the wallet in both hands. The leather felt tired, as if it had been handled by a dozen strangers, edges greased to a gray shine, stitches raised like ribs along the seam. It weighed almost nothing, yet my fingers ached from it. I glanced at the cake, white frosting, blue letters that leaned because I'd iced them myself. "Happy birthday day, Mom." 2 candles shaped like a 6 and a 4 burned lopsided, wax running into the valley of the $5 roses I'd tucked along the rim. Beside them sat the knife with its crooked serrated edge, the same one I'd used to slice oranges for Jason's Little League team when there wasn't money for Gatorade. "Come on, it's a joke," Jason said, grinning like a man who expected the room to stay on his side of the line. He was immaculate. New sneakers bright as chalk, a watch that flashed when he moved his wrist, a shirt that didn't come from the thrift rack like mine. He had his father's jaw without his father's softness, that gentle cave-in that meant a man could be moved by a song on the radio or the sight of his sleeping child. I'd brought the wallet to my chest the way some people hold a Bible. My hands were shaking, not with anger yet, but with the stubborn tremor of a woman who has scrubbed grout with a toothbrush and wrung mops with bare wrists for more years than anyone here had been alive. A laugh stuck in my throat, brittle and wrong. Well, I managed. At least it won't weigh down my purse. Legend. Tyler crowed. Sophia's got jokes. "Open it," Mia urged, leaning forward, eyes shining, not with malice exactly, but the curious delight of someone watching a magician and hoping for doves. I could see the ring light glow in her pupils from all those videos they made of themselves, their reflections forever clapping back at them. I wondered if they'd film my face too, this moment, and watch it later when the room went quiet. I did open it, more to end the staring than because I needed to confirm its emptiness. There were no sleeves for family photos, no little zippered pouch, just a horizon of cracked brown and the smell of old glue. The sight made a sound inside me, like the pop of a thread pulling free. There is a particular humiliation that arrives slowly, like a tide you refuse to notice until your calves are soaked. I heard my own voice from years ago saying, "We're fine, honey. We have what we need," while I watered down soup and pinched salt into the pot with fingers that shook from low sugar. I saw the bus windows fogging at 4:50 am, the sky still black, my reflection layered over laundry bags as big as toddlers. I remembered counting coins on the kitchen table late at night, nickels winking like cheap stars, until a stack of quarters seemed like a victory parade. "Cut the cake, Mom," Jason said, as if we'd finished with the entertainment portion and now the program could proceed. He was close enough for me to smell his cologne, something expensive that tried to imitate cedar and ended up smelling like confidence you could spray on. He tapped the box with his knuckle. Just a bit of fun. I looked up at him, and for a second I caught the boy he used to be, the one who tucked dandelions behind my ear on the walk home from school and asked if clouds ever got tired of floating. It was there, thin as tissue, almost transparent, before the smirk folded back over his face like a shutter. Shame flashed through me, hot and private. The shame wasn't for being poor. It was for letting my son forget what it had cost to keep him from feeling it. "Make a wish," Mia chimed, clasping her hands, and the others leaned in, their faces tilted toward mine, warm with the candle's light. Even their attention felt borrowed. I inhaled, and the room filled with wax and sugar. A wish, I thought, and the only one that came to me was small and almost childish, to be spoken to gently in my own kitchen. I blew, and the 6 guttered first, dipping. Then the 4 followed in a tired curl of smoke. Polite applause broke out like hail on a tin roof. Jason slid an arm around my shoulders and squeezed just enough for it to look affectionate in a photograph. "There she is," he said to the room, not to me. "Birthday queen." I cut the cake, handing slices to hands that didn't know dishwater heat, to polished nails that had never bullied under rubber gloves. Crumbs clung to the plate edges, the frosting smudged like snow pushed by a plow. "So good, Sophia," Brandon said with his mouth full, and I wanted to ask if he told his own mother her cake was good, if he looked at her the way he was looking at me. Like kindness cost nothing because someone else had already paid. Speech. Tyler called, thumping the table again. My throat tightened. I set the knife down on the cardboard, drew in air, and let my eyes rest on the window. Outside, the neighbor's porch light helloed the last of the day's dust. The maple tree tossed its dark leaves and made a soft sound like yes, yes, yes. I turned back. "Thank you for coming," I said, and because some part of me refused to be dragged into their joke without leaving a mark of my own, I lifted the empty wallet and added, "And thank you for the gift. It's honest." A slice of silence. A few quick laughs, relief cracking the moment back open. The speaker jumped to the next song. Jason grinned as if I'd confirmed his good humor. "That's my mom," he said, pride coating the words the way glaze hides a bruise in fruit. When they finally drifted toward the door, plans for a bar I wouldn't be invited to unfolding in loud, confident voices, I stood at the sink and let the tap run until the water turned cold enough to sting. Plates lined up like a small army awaiting orders. I washed them one by one, my hands finding their old rhythm, scrub, rinse, stack, and the motions steadied me. Foam gathered like lace at my wrists. From the other room, the speaker played to nobody. I turned it off, and the apartment exhaled. On the table, the wallet lay where I'd set it, a small, open mouth that had nothing to say. The blue icing had stained my fingertips. When I wiped them on a towel, a faint tint remained, a childish blue that didn't belong to my hands anymore. The candles had slumped into nubs, small, spent soldiers. I gathered the wax, the torn ribbon from the box, the paper plates bent into smiles of surrender, and dropped them into the trash. The bag sighed down into the can like a curtain falling. I picked up the wallet again and held it to the light. The leather showed 1,000 tiny fractures, a network of paths leading nowhere. I pressed my thumb against the seam and felt something give, just a whisper. Emptiness, I thought, wasn't the absence of money. Emptiness was laughter that echoed after the door had closed, a son's voice sharpening words, until they stopped sounding like love. Emptiness was a woman in her own kitchen, learning how to stand still in a room that had shifted under her feet. I set the wallet on the counter beside the cake knife and folded my dish towel with care, aligning corner to corner, as if neatness could be a kind of prayer. Then I turned off the light, letting the apartment settle into the soft gray that comes before sleep, and listened to the quiet until it remembered me. Days fell into their grooves the way coins fall into a counting tray, each one landing with a small, inevitable clink. Jason's life ran loud above me and beyond me. Buzzing phones, door slams, neon schedules, laughter that belonged to people who learned each other's names by shouting them over music. Mine moved in quieter circuits. Kettle, cup, cloth, light, off. We did not collide. We skimmed. He had a good job, better than anything I ever held, and money that flickered between his fingers like a magic trick. Packages arrived at the door addressed to him in bold, handsome fonts, shoes shaped like boats, headphones that swallowed sound whole, a jacket whose zipper teeth gleamed like a threat. He peeled price stickers the way I used to peel oranges for him on bleachers, long skins of vinyl curling to the floor. When he left for the night, he left the smell of his cologne hanging in the hallway like a verdict. The lock clicked behind him the way a metronome insists on its one true rhythm. Out, late, louder. He did not spend $1 on me unless it was by accident. One grocery receipt folded into his pocket with the bars, a ride share dropped at the wrong address, so I happened to be standing under the same street lamp when the car slid away. He did not spend words on me either. You good? He'd say, already passing, and my mouth would arrange, obediently, around yes. At night, when the apartment cooled and the neighbors' televisions stopped arguing with each other through the walls, I sat at the kitchen table with the wallet. It lay there like something found on a beach after the tide has held it and changed its mind. Salt-worn, patient. Jason had called it worthless. He'd been right about the numbers stamped into its seams, the brands it didn't know. He was wrong about the part of it that counted. I had slipped something inside long ago, and sometimes when the clock ticked into the part of the night where time grows strange and heavy, I slid a fingernail under the lining to feel the soft rise where the hidden pocket bulged. Papers slept there, thin, obedient, older than his memory, younger than my fear. I didn't need to unfold them. I knew their topography by heart. The place where a crease had split, the shadow of a blue stamp like a fingerprint, my own handwriting marching across the page with a steadiness my hand no longer possessed. I would rest my palm on the wallet the way you rest your hand on a sleeping child's back, counting the quiet proof of life under the skin. Neighbors knew more about us than we said. Mrs. Alvarez on the landing, watering her spider plant, tipped the kettle spout toward me in a little salute and lowered her voice. Poor Sophia, she gave her whole life for that boy. She meant it kindly. Pity always thinks it's doing you a favor. Downstairs, Mr. Cole cleared snow from the stoop with a shovel that took chunks out of the wood. You need anything, you holler, he said, his breath smoke-white. It is the small mercies that loosen the knot you've learned to keep tied in your throat. My sister, Ruth, phoned on Sundays. She lived 2 states away, in a split level with a white fence that stayed white, because men in coveralls power-washed it twice a year. You sound thin, she would say. It wasn't about weight. She'd listened to me since we were girls, 2 heads under one quilt, telling each other the way out of houses we were too young to leave. He doesn't respect you. You need to stop letting him walk over you. I told her love wasn't a door. I could not install a lock that let me out and kept him in. It's both, I admitted, because if I could not be brave, I could at least be accurate. My love is how I hold on, and the holding hurts. On Tuesday mornings, I rolled the laundry cart down the cracked sidewalk to the laundromat. The cart's wheels sang that tired metal song only I seemed to hear. Inside, the washing machines shouldered their loads like soldiers resigned to orders. The regulars nodded. Denise in her city crossing scrubs, the college boy who never remembered quarters, the twin brothers who folded in tandem like a dance. I mended here too, buttons, cuffs, the seam of my winter coat where stuffing had tried to escape. Stitch by stitch, I taught fabric to behave again. There is a catechism in repair that can keep a woman from breaking. At the grocery store, I memorized the minute language of prices, the way the decimal point moves like a nervous eye, the way a sale sign brightens a row as if summer had been poured over it. I knew which cashier would round a penny down and which would call for a manager if a coupon printed smudged. I did not resent this knowledge. It had kept our lights on. There is dignity in being exact about what you can afford and making it enough. Jason's friends became the chorus of our rooms. You coming out? Bro, that jacket slaps. Playlist or bartender? Names that I did not know arrived on his lips like new planets. A Ryan with a yacht, a Kelsey who laughed like an emergency alarm, a Miguel who had a guy for everything. When they stumbled in after last call, their voices climbed the stairwell like ivy. I learned to read their footsteps the way you read weather. Tyler stomped. Mia tiptoed. Brandon dragged his feet as if the night had added weight. I stopped waiting up. Waiting is a lot like begging if you do it too visibly. On my table, the wallet kept its post. I did not hide it. I left it where it could be seen because hiding it would have made it a secret, and I was done keeping secrets that cost me. I would wipe the table clean and set the wallet back as you might set a place for someone who never remembered to RSVP. Sometimes the morning sun snuck in at such an angle the leather looked new, its tired skin warmed into a deeper brown. Most days it looked exactly like what it was. An old thing asked to keep doing the job it was made for. When the apartment grew too small for my thoughts, I walked. 2 blocks west, the city lifted into glass and ambition. 2 blocks east, it settled into porches and quiet arguments. I preferred the east. There, a woman my age sold homemade soap that smelled like real flowers, not perfume's guesses. There, kids chalked constellations on the sidewalk and named them after dogs. I carried the wallet in my bag then, not because I needed it, but because absence made me anxious. The thing you're afraid of losing becomes heavier than the thing itself. In church, I sat in the 3rd pew from the back, left side, and watched the light stain the floor blue and red. When the choir sang, I thought about breath, how even a body tired as mine can become a bell if enough air is poured through it. People prayed for countries and cancers and courts. I prayed for tone. Speak to me gently in my own kitchen. And for the discipline to let my prayer be a prayer rather than a list of instructions for God. After the service, Pastor Elaine squeezed my hands. You are seen, she said. It is amazing what stays inside you just because someone said so. Once I found a photograph wedged behind the sugar canister. Jason at 8, missing front tooth, the sun combing his hair into gold. He was squinting at me as if my face were the most interesting thing the morning could make. Holding the picture, I understood that memory is a room with no doors. You live there as long as you can stand it. Then you walk the perimeter touching the walls, and when you are ready, you sit down on the floor and let the light make patterns over your knees. I slid the photograph into the wallet, behind, not with, the papers, because the past and the proof should keep each other company, I thought, when the present refuses to. I kept the house the way I keep my promises, clean, even when no one inspected. Floors that let you walk barefoot without regret. Towels folded like they were being admitted to a good school. A fern by the sink that earned its green honestly under a north window. Slackness is contagious. I refused to help it spread. If Jason noticed, he didn't say. If he did not notice, it didn't matter. You do not make a room decent for applause. Sometimes the phone lit with his name at odd hours. Rent due on the 5th, he texted once, as if I had ever forgotten the shape of a month. Another night. Don't wait up. The messages needed no answers. I saved my words for where they could do work. I answered Ruth. I answered Pastor Elaine. I answered the old nurse at the clinic who called to remind me to refill my prescription and stayed on the line an extra minute to tell me what the weather looked like from her window, as if sharing sky made us relatives. If there is a sound to a mother's patience, it is not a sigh. It's a small click, like the sound a lid makes when the jar seals, and you know the peaches will last the winter. I moved through my days making that sound. I did not bargain with silence. I set a chair for it and kept my back warm with a shawl when it joined me. The wallet stayed where I could see it. The kitchen light made its thin sheen, and when the house finally slept, I laid my palm on that soft, raised place and counted. 1, 2, 3, until my heartbeat matched the clock's, and the clock agreed to be gentle. The storm had rolled in just as evening laid its heavy hand across the city, and by the time Jason's key scraped at the door, the rain was lashing sideways, slamming the windows like a crowd demanding entry. Thunder pressed against the walls, its echo deep and mean, and the lights in the kitchen flickered once, uncertain. I had set the wallet on the counter earlier, without much thought, but when I heard the door bang open, my eyes fell to it, the way you glance at an old wound when pain stirs there again. Jason's voice tore through the hallway before his shoes even touched the mat. Life's unfair. Do you hear me, Mom? Unfair. He stormed in, water streaking down his jacket, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes wild and glassy. He slammed his keys onto the table so hard the little dish rattled, one key jumping free like it wanted to escape the room. I didn't move. I sat at the table, hands folded in my lap, my tea cooling beside me. His words hit the walls, hit me, and then circled the kitchen like restless birds with nowhere to land. I gave everything, and look what I get in return. Jason roared, pacing, knocking over the chair opposite me. He kicked it upright again, but not to fix it, only because it dared to be in his way. I worked, I showed up, and what do they do? Throw me out like trash. Fired. Fired. For what? For making a joke. He stopped pacing just long enough to stab a finger at me, his chest heaving, his breath sour with beer and bitterness. Do you know what they said? That I was disrespectful to my elders. Elders. Can you believe that? Old people with one foot in the grave, dragging the rest of us down. And I'm the problem. I'm the problem. The storm boomed in agreement, but I said nothing. Silence has its own shape. It can be sharper than any word. I looked at the wallet instead, lying quiet and unassuming on the counter. Jason's eyes followed mine, and when he saw it, the sneer spread across his face like oil on water. You still keep that junk, Mom? Pathetic. He snatched it up and dangled it between his fingers as though it were something dirty he'd found in the gutter. Look at this thing. Who even makes wallets like this anymore? Cheap, cracked, empty. Just like you. The words landed where they always landed, in that part of me that still remembered the feel of his little hand in mine, warm and trusting. They cut, but the wound wasn't new. He had been carving at it for years. What shocked me wasn't the cruelty. It was how comfortable he had become in wielding it. I could have shouted back, told him how many nights I'd scrubbed floors until my knees burned, how many hours I'd stood behind counters swallowing insults just to keep him fed. I could have reminded him of the coats that fit him in winter, the shoes that never pinched, the birthday cakes pulled together when my purse echoed with emptiness. But words were wasted on him when his ears were filled with his own noise. Instead, I reached across the counter with slow, steady fingers and slid the wallet toward him. The leather whispered against the wood. "Then open it, Jason," I said softly. "See what's really inside." He rolled his eyes so hard it was a wonder they didn't stick. "What? Another one of your sad notes about gratitude and sacrifice." "Spare me." He flipped the wallet open with one hand, expecting nothing but the hollow laugh of emptiness. But then he noticed the seam, slightly raised, carefully stitched, the faintest bulge beneath. His arrogance faltered. He tugged at the zipper, irritated at first, as if the thing itself was mocking him by resisting. The storm outside cracked the sky, and for a heartbeat, the room was washed in white light, Jason's face pale and uncertain. The zipper gave way with a soft rasp, like breath sucked through clenched teeth. He reached inside, fingers fishing, and when they closed on the folded papers tucked deep within, his posture stiffened. He pulled them free slowly, like a man lifting something he didn't quite trust, his eyes narrowing at the fragile bundle. I stayed silent, watching. My heart knocked at my ribs, not with fear, but with the strange, solemn weight of inevitability. This was the moment the past had been waiting for, patient as a stone in the earth. Jason smirked once more, trying to salvage the moment, trying to make the room bend to his performance. "What is this? Mom? Some old receipts? Another one of your relics?" His laugh cracked in the middle, thinner than he intended. He unfolded the first paper, and the storm outside grumbled as though it, too, leaned closer to listen. I sat still, hands folded, watching him confront what he thought he knew, and what he was about to learn. Jason froze. The storm outside raged on, but in that small kitchen, time seemed to hold its breath. His thumb brushed across the paper, as if it might disintegrate under his touch. The hospital bill, yellow with age, bore his name at the top, Jason Miller, Pediatric Surgery. The ink had faded to a pale gray, but the words still carried the same weight they had the day I first saw them, when they had landed in my hands like a verdict. He swallowed hard, scanning the lines with the awkward rhythm of someone whose eyes wanted to move faster than his mind could follow. The numbers leaped from the page, stark, merciless. Tens of thousands of dollars. A debt so large it had once pressed down on my chest at night, keeping me awake long after my body begged for rest. Behind that bill, his fingers brushed against the note I had written, my handwriting uneven but determined. "I'll work any hours necessary. My son's life is worth every sacrifice." Jason read the line aloud under his breath, his lips trembling as the words left them, as though they had burned him from the inside. His hands shook so badly the page crinkled, its edges tearing a little at the fold. He pressed the paper flat on the counter, his jaw working as if to form a defense, an excuse, a joke. But none came. He reached into the wallet again, pulling free more papers, each one a thread from the tapestry of years I had woven in silence. Loan agreements, with my signature scrawled at the bottom. Ink pressed deep into the page, as if I thought pressure could give me more credibility than the zeros in my bank account ever could. Overdue bills with red stamps shouting across the paper like accusations. Notices from creditors reminding me, month after month, that my son's life had come with a cost no mother should have to tally. Jason's breathing grew ragged as he shuffled through them. His face drained of color, lips pale, sweat rising along his hairline, despite the chill that storm-dampened air pushed through the cracks of the window. Each page he read was a mirror shoved in front of him, but the reflection wasn't his, it was mine. My nights bent over scrub buckets, my mornings dragging aching bones to work, my afternoons sewing until my eyes blurred. He saw it all in the slanted writing, the stamped dates, the official seals. He stopped at one letter, folded carefully, the paper so thin from handling it seemed almost transparent. It was a plea I had written to the bank, measured, polite, desperate. Please extend the deadline. My son has another appointment. I cannot let him miss it. I will pay what I owe, even if it takes the rest of my life." Jason's lips parted as if to speak, but all that came out was a jagged breath. His throat convulsed, and for a long moment he just stood there, shoulders caving in, eyes shimmering. "You." His voice cracked. He coughed, swallowed, tried again. You worked all those years for me." I didn't move. My hands were steady on the table, palms flat against the wood as though bracing against an old earthquake that had finally caught up to us. I nodded quietly, my voice calm but ironclad. "You were too young to remember, and too proud to ask." The storm punctuated the silence with a flash of lightning, the light painting Jason's face white, every line of guilt sharpened. He pressed a hand against his mouth as though trying to dam up the tide inside him, but his eyes betrayed him. Tears welled, spilling despite his effort to hold them back. He looked at me, then down at the bills again, as if hoping they might change under his gaze, reveal themselves to be fakes, props in some cruel theater. But they didn't. They were stubbornly, unbearably real. The clock ticked above the sink, loud in the stillness. Every second that passed seemed to press deeper into him. His chest heaved, his breath uneven. He flipped through the stack again, as though repetition might dull the blow. But each page was another cut, another strike against the arrogance he had worn like armor for years. I watched him quietly, my silence heavier than any accusation I could have spoken. I didn't need to say that the shoes he wore in high school had been bought on borrowed money, that the tutors he complained about had come at the cost of me pawning my wedding ring, that the nights I told him I wasn't hungry were nights I gave up my own dinner so he could eat. The papers said it for me. Jason pressed both hands flat on the counter, leaning over the pile. His shoulders trembled. His reflection stared back at him from the polished wood, an older version of the boy whose life had once been clutched in the fragile grip of surgery and chance. He had mocked me hours earlier, sneered at my emptiness, thrown laughter at me like stones. And now, here, the stones lay broken at his feet, their weight too heavy to lift. "Mom." His voice was small, childlike, a voice I hadn't heard in years. It quivered, soaked in disbelief and guilt. "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at him then, not with anger, but with the weary patience of years spent carrying both love and burden. Because love isn't something you hang on the wall for credit, Jason. It's something you carry quietly. You were too young to bear it. So I bore it for you. The storm outside softened, rain easing into a gentler rhythm, but in the kitchen the silence stretched long and thick, wrapping itself around us both. Jason stood, trembling, staring down at the proof of a love he had mistaken for weakness, a sacrifice he had mistaken for nothing at all. And I sat, steady, waiting, not for thanks, not for apology, but for him to finally see. Jason sat down hard, as if gravity had picked a side. The breath punched out of him. He clutched the wallet with both hands, knuckles pale, gripping it the way a man grips a ledge. Down the hall, a floorboard creaked. His friends, Tyler's baseball cap silhouette, Mia's ponytail, Brandon's hunched shoulders, hesitated in the doorway, eyes averted, and then slipped out without a word, the door closing behind them with the gentleness people reserve for rooms of prayer or sickness. What remained was thunder murmuring in the distance and the low, faithful buzz of the refrigerator, a metronome for difficult truths. For the first time since he was a boy, Jason cried in front of me. Not the shallow leaks of frustration he'd learned from bad winners and worse men, but a cracking open from somewhere old and sore. His chest shook. He made a sound I knew from other midnights, the sound babies make when their bodies are still figuring out how to channel pain through air. He tried to wipe his face with the back of his wrist, and ended up scrubbing at his eyes like a penitent, the papers trembling on the counter beside him, the topmost bill shining dully where tears had fallen. Mom. His first word wobbled and broke. He swallowed, gathered himself, tried again. Mom, I mocked you. I humiliated you. And all this time, you carried my life in your hands. The kitchen took the sentence and set it down between us like a warm bowl you don't dare touch. Something in my chest loosened, not relief exactly, but recognition. The body finally hearing in his voice what it had known in silence for years. He bent forward until his forehead touched the edge of the table, and stayed there, shuddering. I don't deserve forgiveness, he said into the wood. The words were not performance. They were surrender. I moved without thinking, the way you move when a glass topples or a child stumbles. Pure reflex, older than anger. I cupped the back of his head, the same skull I had kissed 1,000 times, while the world was still deciding who he would be. His hair was damp from rain and from shame. The smell of his cologne had thinned, and beneath it lay the human smell that makes every apology real. He turned into me like the tide turns toward the moon, and I gathered him, awkwardly at first, because he was a man now, not the sleepy boy I used to lift from the couch. He folded, though, in that ancient way sons fold into mothers, long limbs trying to remember a small shape. He buried his face against my chest, trembling like the child I once rocked to sleep. I don't deserve forgiveness, he said again, smaller. My own tears came then, not as spectacle, but as release, the body finally allowed to be as wet as the weather. I stroked his hair in the old rhythm. My hand remembered it, even if time had put new aches in the joints. You're my son, Jason, I said, each word laid carefully, like stitches you don't intend to rip out. Love isn't about deserving. It's about remembering what matters. He held tighter, clutching the wallet between us so that its edge pressed into my ribs. I didn't move it. Let it bruise me, I thought. Let the mark be honest, a small violet moon I would not photograph, and he would not see, but that would fade according to its own calendar. His breath warmed the fabric of my blouse. We stayed like that while the storm worked its way down to rain, and the rain negotiated with the gutters in a reasonable whisper. When he lifted his head, his face looked younger and more used, as if grief had taken a layer of varnish off. He kept one palm flat on the wallet on the table, as if it might slip away if not anchored. His eyes flicked to the stack of documents, then back to me, a flinch each time they passed over the word surgery, over numbers that used to scare the air out of my lungs. How did I not see it? He asked, a question to me, and to the ceiling, and to whatever old angel manages the sight of sons. Seeing is work, I said. Some work comes late. He nodded, once, twice, as if agreeing with the verdict. He touched the note again. I'll work any hours necessary. My son's life is worth every sacrifice. He traced the groove of my signature with his fingertip, a child teaching himself the alphabet of costs. Then his hand strayed to the photograph tucked behind the bills, the one of him at 8 with the bright, gap-toothed grin. He looked from that small boy to the present tense of himself and flinched as if he'd been caught committing kindness in a cruel room. Something like a sob escaped him. He pressed his tongue to the roof of his mouth and collected it. Was I? His voice frayed and braided back together. Mom, was I always this? He searched for a word that could confess without damning. He failed, and the failure was honest. I did not inventory his wrongs for him. Confession loses its truth when presented with a ledger. I let the question sit and learned again how to hold silence that heals. The kitchen clock clucked toward the top of the hour. Somewhere, a radiator sighed. The house remembered it could be gentle. He gathered the bills into a neat pile with the care you give to photographs of the dead, squared their corners, slid the note and the picture on top as if at last he understood which documents make a life. Then he opened the wallet's main pocket, the obvious one that yawns with use, and laid the stack inside. He closed it slowly, 2 hands, reverent, like closing a book you're not finished with. His fingers explored the scar of the zipper he had unsealed, the seam he had mocked, the hidden compartment whose existence had redrawn the map of his certainty. He lifted the wallet to his chest and held it there. Not a performance, not proof, just contact, the way you touch a headstone, and remember that names are heavier up close. I don't know how to. He stopped, started differently. I want to say the right thing, but the right thing feels small. Then say the true thing, I answered. He nodded again, eyes shining in a way I had seen only in fever or in those rare unguarded mornings when he forgot to be anyone but himself. I'm sorry, he said, each syllable unadorned, stripped of rescue. I am so sorry. There are apologies that ask for absolution, and there are apologies that accept the world as it is and promise nothing but the burden of knowing. His belonged to the second kind. My hands wrapped his again, and we let the apology be a third thing between us, living and warm. The apartment had changed its mind about the weather. The air smelled rinsed. I stood long enough to put the kettle on, familiar ritual, not to fix anything but to mark time with a small human act. The gas caught with a blue lick. The kettle began its patient drumbeat. Steam wreathed the kitchen light, and for a moment the room looked like a photograph of itself, edges soft, the center holding. Jason didn't let go of the wallet even to wipe his face. He sat with it balanced on his thigh, thumb moving across the leather in slow arcs as if he were polishing the past without trying to erase it. He looked at me as if he had rediscovered something he once owned and couldn't remember how he lost. Mom, he said, and it was just my name, not a request or a complaint or a prelude, and that alone was a gift. I poured tea and set a cup within reach of his free hand. He wrapped his fingers around the warmth, and the heat brought new color into his knuckles. He stared into the steam, then lifted the cup and drank like a man who had finally found the right temperature for truth. From that day on, the empty wallet became his most precious possession, not as a joke, but as a reminder of the price of love, and the lesson he almost learned too late.